Hello, my name is Sharon Sarago, and I am here to help you raise your writing scores on both the SAT and the ACT. I have already given you a video about subject-verb agreement, which is probably the second most important thing on the test. And today I'm going to do pronoun usage. And I would consider that the most important thing simply because across the nation we misuse pronouns so badly. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, you know that I'm going to have an entire series of videos over every aspect of grammar that is on that test. So I invite you to continue watching, and let's just get started. With pronoun usage, there will be many things that you already know and many things that you don't. It's just like subject-verb agreement. So the first thing that we want to do is talk about pronoun antecedent agreement. You already know that a pronoun is a substitute for a noun. And since it is substituting, of course, it has to be the same as that noun that it's substituting for. So let's look at this very first example here. Our example right here says Mary washed her clothes. The pronoun that we have is her. And the word that it is substituting for, of course, which is Mary, is called the antecedent. And of course, Mary is a girl, and therefore we have a feminine pronoun. Mary is singular, her is singular. Mary is third person, and her is third person. So it agrees in all ways there. But this is just a pronoun substituting for a noun. They can also substitute for pronouns. And if you will remember in our subject-verb agreement lesson, I made you memorize all the singular indefinite pronouns, and here we see one of them, everyone. The pronoun that we're using here is his. And his has to go back and refer to the antecedent, the word that it's substituting for. So this has to agree with this. We know that this word is singular. You memorized it. Singular. And that's why we have his. I do know that in our spoken language, most of the time we hear people say their. Everyone in the room received their materials. This just simply is not correct. It is not correct. It has to be, this pronoun has to agree with its antecedent, and since this is singular, your pronoun has to also be singular. Here we have two different people, and the important thing is that it's joined by and. So think of it as this, 1 plus 1 equals 2. And so now we're looking at a plural subject. And our pronoun over here that refers to that subject is also plural because these are plural. If I had the word or instead of and, then I'm talking about only one of these people. Either one of them, but only one, and therefore this word would have to have been his. Let's see if we can put that to work in some sentences here. The first one that we look at, one should take time to do, we put a pronoun in here, work properly. Well, our antecedent we already know is going to be one. We already know that that is singular. And therefore, we know that we have to have a singular pronoun right here. And that would be his. You could have put her if you know that it's all women. It's not a good idea to put his or her. It gets very tedious if you have to write an entire essay with both of those words. And once you start it, you need to finish it that way. So in our language, if you do not know the gender, it is appropriate to default to the masculine gender. And we do not know the gender, so we will just say his. Number 2, either Bill or Sam. This is what we were talking about just a moment ago. If you have or there, you're not talking about both of them. You're talking about one or the other, which still means it's singular. Either Bill or Sam has promised to lend us. Again, we're going to have a masculine gender here, and it must be singular. Number 3, neither Linda nor Diane. Same thing. If it's joined by or nor, we're not talking about both of them. We're talking about one. And this is a feminine, therefore we have a feminine gender. Next, member is our noun here. Each is an adjective in this case, and choir is an adjective in this case. Member had, and this word is singular, and therefore we need to have a singular pronoun. When we say each member, each choir member, I know that contextually it sounds like we're talking about everybody. But you have to look only at the antecedent, that's one word, and you say, is that singular or plural? It is singular, therefore your pronoun has to be singular. It's the same thing here. Every police officer sounds like you're talking about all of them, but you have to look only at the antecedent and decide what that one word is, and it is singular. Therefore, you are going to have a singular pronoun. Every police officer did his duty. Since we're talking about these words that can be singular indefinite pronouns, let's review that and see how it works with our pronoun agreement. First of all, here are the pronouns that you memorized in subject-verb agreement. Everyone, everybody, everything. And remember, I told you to memorize the pattern first, one, body, thing, because it repeats itself over and over and over again. So here are those basic ones, and then you have these bottom ones, each, either, neither, one. All of these are singular indefinite pronouns, and now they are going to become the antecedents of other pronouns. So let's see how that works. Here's our example. Everyone in the room is going to, normally you hear people say everyone in the room is going to their seat, but that is not correct, because these pronouns have to agree with the antecedent, and we know that everyone is singular. We memorized it so that we would know. And therefore, we have to choose the singular pronoun. Here's another example. Each of the candidates did a great job in presenting his or their view. Well, a lot of kids are going to think candidates is the antecedent, but remember that that is a prepositional phrase, and you will help yourself greatly if you simply eliminate those things. Therefore, we're left with each is our subject, and it is the antecedent of this pronoun. We know that each is singular because we memorized it, and therefore we have to choose the singular pronoun. Let's see how that works when we do some more sentences. Our task is, first of all, look at these pronouns and then find the antecedent. Well, before I even look for the antecedent, I see that this is in the way. I don't even want to hear this word doctors. If I do, I'm going to be tempted to say doctors and they. If I go ahead and eliminate it because it's a prepositional phrase, then I know that my antecedent is neither. It is singular. We memorized it. And therefore, I have to have a singular pronoun, which is going to be he. Number 2. We have everyone on the train was eager to see the unusual sights that he or they had been told were in the region. Well, clearly, everyone is our antecedent. It is singular. in spite of the fact that it talks about a lot of people, it is a word that is singular. It says every one, not every 20. Therefore, our pronoun also must be singular in order for it to agree. Next, we have far from the view of the spectators. The player found an isolated spot where, well, if we're going to have trouble finding the antecedent, get rid of all the prepositional phrases and then look for it. The player found an isolated spot where he or they could relax. Well, player is clearly the word that we're talking about. If you're not sure, somebody's going to relax. Who is it? It's the player, and that is singular, and therefore you have to have a singular pronoun to go with it. There is another aspect that's just as difficult, and that is when we use pronouns as subjects and objects. The first thing that you might want to familiarize yourself with is this chart. We have nominative case pronouns in this column, the possessive case pronouns here, and objective case pronouns here. The nominative case is used for subjects. The possessive case, of course, just shows possession, and the objective case is used for any kind of object, and that would include objects of the preposition, direct objects, indirect objects. So basically, when we're talking about pronouns as subjects and objects, those are the only two things we really need to deal with. If it shows possession, nobody makes mistakes in that, so I'm not worried about you're making a mistake. But we will have to look at these two. So in the example up here, we're trying to look for a hidden pronoun. I've put X's there because I don't want you to have some predetermined idea about what that pronoun should be. It will be one. All I want to know is if you can tell me whether it would be a subject or an object based upon where it is in the sentence. So remember that subjects generally do the action and objects generally receive the action. The other thing that you might think about is subjects generally are at the beginning of the sentence and objects are at the end of the sentence or in the middle. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule. It's just generally you'll find subjects up in the front and objects in the back. But definitely the subject is the one that performs the action. So on number 1, we want to see, well, what's happening? Somebody's going to the movies. Somebody went to the movies. This is our verb. Who did that? It would be whoever we've got sitting here. So that would be a subject. Here we say Gary went to the movies. Well, we know that he did. We know he's the subject. And it says and that means that these two things are joined together. So if Gary was a subject, then so is this one a subject. Next, we have Dad showed somebody how to build the project. Well, showed is your verb. Who did that? Dad. That's the subject, and therefore we don't get another subject in this clause. This therefore must be an object. Here we've got Larry and somebody. This is still the verb. This is still the subject, and therefore this is still an object. So let's go farther with that. All right, now you get to just simply pick the correct pronoun. So what do you think it's going to be? I or me went to the movies last night. Okay, I. What's it going to be here? Gary and me went to the movies. Gary and I went to the movies. Half of you will say one thing, half of you will say the other. So here's a way that you can do that. You can look at this and say it's the subject and therefore it would be I, but you could also just cross this out. We don't need that information and read the sentence by itself. And you, of course, would say I went to the movies. You would never say me went to the movies. So if you cannot say that by itself, then why would you think you could say Gary and me went to the movies? It won't work. It's I went to the movies, And if you want to attach Gary to that, then Gary and I went to the movies. Number 3, you've got Dad showed I how to build the project, or Dad showed me. Of course, you know it's going to be Dad showed me. This is the subject. This would be an object. Number 4, Dad showed Larry and I how to build the project, or Dad showed Larry and me how to build the project. An awful lot of you are going to say, Dad showed Larry and I how to build the project. A very large number of people say that. I think they just think that it sounds really, really sophisticated. But let's look at it. Here's your verb. This is your subject. Dad did the action. So all of these are objects. And if you're not sure how it goes, then scratch out this other person and see what you would say by itself. Dad showed I how to build a project. You really like that? No, you don't. It's going to be Dad showed me how to build a project. So remember, whatever it is by itself, that's what it's going to be. Dad showed Larry and me. Dad showed me. Dad showed Larry. Dad showed Larry and me how to build the project. It might be kind of fun, now that you know how to do this, to start listening to conversations that other people have and just see how many times people actually come up with the wrong answer there. Don't correct them. That's rude. But it would be nice for you to just listen and see how many people make a mistake in this single area in our grammar. Now, with this in mind, we're going to look at a lot of questions that have this concept in it. Look at this. These are pronouns as compound elements, and that means it's a compound direct object. And as I just told you, the easiest way to do this and to get it correct is to ignore that first person, and it would be Samuel told me. And just remember, whatever it's going to be by itself, that's what it's going to be if you should decide to say Samuel told Kathy and me that we already had tickets. Because you don't say Samuel told I, therefore you cannot say Samuel told Kathy and I. You say Samuel told me, therefore it would have to be Samuel told Kathy and me. Once more, whatever it is by itself, that's what it's going to be. So as you read through these, I want you to just read them without this word. Leave that extra person out and the and. Mom went to the library for me. This one is starting the sentence. I tried to get the attendant's attention. He can get into the line now. Don't forget the if here. If she had waited. The manager gave the passes to her. The man at the door surprised me, yes, and the man at the door surprised him. Okay, so we had to read it twice. That's okay. But you wouldn't want to say the man at the door surprised he, and you wouldn't want to say the man at the door surprised I. So read it separately, read it twice. The man at the door surprised me. The man at the door surprised him. That's your answer right there. It's very easy to get all of these correct if you will follow that procedure. If you don't, if you turn your ears on and you're listening to what everybody around you says, you are very likely to miss a lot of them. So protect yourself. Just read it without that extra person. It's easy. Now, are you ready for the big one? There we go. What is it? What is it? It's who and whom. Okay, for many of you, this might be the only time in your lives that you get a lesson on how to pick who versus whom. But it's really very simple. Who is the subject? Look down here at the bottom. Who is equal to the subject, and whom is equal to the object. Okay? So with that information, let's see what we've got. If you follow these 4 steps, you will not make a mistake. It gets very, very simple. So the first step says isolate the clause that uses who or whom and ignore everything else. All right, so come down here. The clause is always going to begin with who or whom. Remember that part so you'll know where to start it. Let's put brackets around it. Who or whom is wearing the red dress? And it says ignore everything else. So scratch this out. It's non-existent now. We're going to ignore it. So don't even think about it. All right. Step 2 says find the verb. And here's our verb, is wearing. Be sure that you include the helping verb with the main verb. Step 3, find the subject of that verb. All right. Well, a lot of people want to say dress is the subject because it's a noun. But are you kidding? The dress can't wear the dress. So who's wearing the dress? Now at this point, you probably want to come back over here and say the girl was, but we've already scratched that out. That's not an option. So the only thing that we have left is this. The pronoun, whichever one it's going to be, is the subject. If I had put Sally right there, would you have a problem saying that's the subject? Nope. And so the pronoun is the subject. Now, remember what we just learned. If it's the subject, you pick who. And if it's an object, it would be whom. Well, ours is the subject, and therefore who is going to be the answer. All right, let's do the same thing now. Go through the same process with the next example. First of all, we isolate the clause that uses who or whom, and remember that it will always start with who or whom. Put brackets around it. Find the verb, step 2. Saw. Step 3, find the subject of that verb. Who did this? It was Janet. That's the subject. You don't get another subject in a clause. Each clause has only one subject. And so, Janet saw these people, and since you're looking for an object, it has to be whom. Janet saw whom at the movies last night. Okay? We're going to practice a lot of these and be sure that you can do them. Do you know who or whom washed the dishes? All right, let's go back to what we know to do. Put brackets around this. Who or whom washed the dishes, step 1. Next, find the verb. Next, find the subject of that verb. It would be the pronoun. We're not sure yet which one it is, but the minute you know that it's the subject, you have to choose who, because who is for subjects, whom is for objects. Number 2, Mom wants to know who or whom is on the phone. First of all, isolate your clause. Second, find the verb. Third, find the subject of that verb. It would be the pronoun, and since it's the subject, it would be who. Number 3, I want to find out who or whom she is calling. First, identify the clause. Second, find the verb. Find the subject of that verb, and then make your pronoun choice. Whom. Number 4, who or whom did you see at the movies last night? The whole thing is the clause, the whole sentence. Find the verb. Did see. It's a helping verb over here, and they've split it up. Did see is your verb. Who did that? You. That's the subject, and therefore we're looking for an object. Next, Jeffrey will not tell me who or whom he took to the movies. First of all, isolate the clause. Secondly, look for the verb. What's the subject of that verb? Who did that? He. And therefore you're looking for an object. Do you see how simple this can be? 6, Becky, who or whom has been absent for 5 months, is planning to retire soon. First, isolate the clause. Ignore everything else. Find the verb, has been. What's the subject of that verb? Who. Number 7, she is the woman to who or whom this book belongs. isolate the clause, as I told you, it will always begin with who or whom. Do not be sidetracked there. It will begin with who or whom. Second, find the verb. What's the subject of that verb? Ask yourself, what is belonging? It's the book that's belonging. And since I already have a subject for this clause, I have to choose whom. These are the rules. And if you will do it this way, you will be able to get all of these correct. Now, when you download the material, you'll have a whole lot of more examples. But your materials that you're going to have with this program will have a ton of stuff to do. Not only that, remember that when we have the test at the end of each chapter, those tests are cumulative. So on subject-verb agreement, we tested only on that. But when you get the test at the end here, it's going to be on subject-verb agreement and pronoun usage. If you're looking only at the video, you're going to find all of your answers right here. Okay? There they are. And when you download your materials, every single section of the program will have your answers available for you at the end of that passage. So I'm hoping that you have learned quite a bit about pronouns this time. It would be to your advantage to go back and look at this several times so that you remember what I've said. This is a very difficult section, and be sure to download your materials for it and work through those things. You can do it 2 or 3 times so that you get it right. This is one of the favorite things that they like to ask on both the SAT and the ACT, and they do it simply because they know that we have lapsed into carelessness in our spoken language, and we make mistakes in this area all the time, so of course they're going to test us over it. If you have a question, you can email me. I've given you my email address here. Be sure to check out my website. I'll have many things there that will interest you. And until our next video, which will be coming up very quickly, I'm going to sign off now. I hope you have much success in your studies.